My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 years and 3 months. A month later he was on intensive one-on-one home-based therapy. By 5, he was in a regular mainstream school, totally indistinguishable from his peers. I soon found there were very little software and teaching aids available to teach children with autism. This document outlines the information on autism I have acquired over the years and the computer software and apps I use to aid my son's recovery. It is important to understand that without any autism therapy or intervention, a child with autism or PDD will absorb far less information and knowledge from the environment than a typical child. A typical child will start to talk at 1.5 to 2 years with almost no help from his parents or siblings. He will then acquire around 6 new words a day and will have a vocabulary of an amazing 10,000 words before the age of 7. A child with autism may become verbal much later and have poor language and social skills if he is not given speech and behavior therapy. He must be given a strong knowledge base, i.e., he must be taught speech, language, and behavior. If you even suspect your child has autism or ASD, you must begin work with him immediately. Do not waste vital time waiting for a formal autism diagnosis. I met one mother who waited 6 months for a formal autism diagnosis before beginning any treatment. Imagine how much she could have taught her child in that time. You will find out for yourself that most doctors know very little about autism and will simply recommend speech therapy, special education, or an early intervention center. The worst thing some doctors will do to a parent is to take away hope. You will acquire more information on autism from other parents of children with autism than you would from any general practitioner. As you work with your child and see the results, you will soon find other parents coming to you for advice. Start working with your child now, even if it means just trying to communicate with him through play. This time will never ever be wasted. Even if tests show that your child does not have an autistic disorder, you've lost nothing. Trying to teach a child with autism at the table could be difficult at first, as the child may resist learning, and lots of positive reinforcement and encouragement is vital. There are many structured teaching methods for children with autism, such as ABA. Many parents will not accept their child has an autistic disorder and will not even seek a diagnosis. Too often, they ignore the signs and hope he will improve on his own. They often wait until it is too late to start work with their child. Although an early autism or ASD diagnosis for this potentially devastating disorder is critical, kids with autism rarely receive a diagnosis before the age of 3 or 4 years. There are no outward physical differences between autistic kids and typical kids. The only differences are behavioral. Autistic kids will exhibit at least some of the following: poor speech and language skills, inappropriate play. Example: the child may continuously spin the wheels of a toy car rather than push it. May line up toys or other objects. May have trouble interacting with others. Poor eye contact. Walking on toes. Hand flapping. Tendency to have narrowly focused and odd interests. Does not ask for things in the same way as other children. Failure to show objects to others. Failure to orient to one's name being called. Failure to engage in reciprocal play where there is a back and forth between two people. Failure to copy others' motor movements. May not use pointing to direct another person's attention. May resist social touch such as hugging. A child with autism can be anywhere in the broad autism spectrum. At the upper end, the child could appear almost normal and have few autistic traits. He may perhaps be the quiet child in the classroom with few or no friends and a couple of quirky habits. He may not even be diagnosed having autism until much later in life. At the lower end of the autism spectrum, the child would be termed low functioning, have poor speech and language, and would require much more intensive autism therapy. No matter where a child is in the autism spectrum, he can and must be helped. Pervasive developmental disorder or PDD is actually a bit of a misnomer. Many doctors who would not like to commit to giving a diagnosis of autism will tell the parents that their child has PDD when in fact the child is in the autism spectrum. Some children are born with autism while others develop the condition usually in their second year. The latter is known as late onset autism. Here, the child develops normally and then usually in the second year gradually develops the symptoms of autism, losing speech and gradually showing more and more of the symptoms of autism. If diagnosed and treated early with one-on-one therapy, autistic children will show remarkable improvement, often to the point of being termed recovered. This is where the child with autism is indistinguishable from his peers. Asperger's disorder is similar to high-functioning autism in how it affects a child's mannerisms and socialization traits. A distinction between Asperger's syndrome and autism is that young children with Asperger's often have normal language development, although the rhythm, pitch, and emphasis are irregular. Unlike autism, Asperger's disorder does not delay other aspects of development. A child usually has age-appropriate self-reliance and an interest in the world around him or her. However, like autism, children with Asperger's syndrome have abnormal social interactions, facial expressions, and gestures. Asperger's disorder affects males 9 times more than females. Its cause is unknown. Speech therapy certainly has its place in prompting and refining a child's speech and vocalization, but it takes many hours a week of intensive one-on-one work to teach the child with autism compliance, new concepts, language, and age-appropriate behavior. A child with autism will typically see a speech therapist for 1 or 2 hours a week. Once your child is in school, it would be wise to continue the speech therapy sessions. Some schools have a speech therapist that works with the children at the school. The frustration of a child with autism was once described as that of being in a maze where the walls are made of glass, trying to communicate with someone on the outside and only being able to bang on the walls. There is no doubt that much frustration and temper tantrums can be reduced and even avoided when communication and language is encouraged and developed. A typical child works out very early that it is in his own interest to acquire language, whilst a child with autism may not. He needs to be taught that language will get him results. On this point, if your child asks for something, give it to him immediately, or at least respond to his request immediately. Ignoring him will certainly not encourage his speech. If a child has autism, the clock has already started to tick even before any formal diagnosis. The most gains will be made when the child is in his very early years. Although children as young as 18 months are on autism therapy, most are diagnosed after 2 years of age and start treatment even later. Whatever you do, don't leave it until it's too late. The sooner you start teaching a child with autism, the better. Of all the therapies around for autism, ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, has attracted the most attention. The system was pioneered by Dr. Ivar Lervis at UCLA in the 60s. ABA is a teaching program that works on systematically removing the traits of autism until the child does not satisfy the criteria for the condition. The system is very intensive but proven to be extremely successful in almost all cases of autism. The ABA system breaks down any task into subtasks and places a very high emphasis on rewarding the child for working well. There is no physical punishment at all in the system. ABA starts off in a very rigid structured form but gradually takes the shape of a typical school environment. Those who know little or nothing about ABA may say it is too rigid and turns the child into a robot by rote learning. This would appear so at the start, but as the child learns to learn, he progresses to a point where he can join his typical peers in their learning style. Most parents who persevere with the program for 2 to 3 years can successfully mainstream their children. The results speak for themselves. The child usually begins school, attending regular classes with an aide. The aide is gradually faded and the child blends in with the class. More on aides and fading later. A question often asked is, how many hours of behavioral therapy does a child with autism need? There are many cases where a child with autism needs up to 40 hours a week, but of course, it depends on the level of severity of the child. A program usually starts with around 15 to 20 hours a week and can work towards 30 or more hours a week. Once a child with autism is in school, the hours of work at home will fall back. Quality is, of course, more important than quantity. Energetic, dedicated therapists are vital to your child's progress. I would strongly suggest one or both parents begin working with the child at least initially rather than leaving him to a therapist. Your child will trust you and understand you are trying to help him. You need to have boundless energy, be animated and genuinely love teaching your child. This is not easy, and experts estimate you could do this for no more than 10 to 12 hours a week. If both parents take turns, the task is, of course, a lot easier. Later, you could introduce a therapist or two to help out, as you will not be able to maintain a high level of energy for too long. The advantage of doing the initial work yourself is that you will then know a good therapist when you see one. Choosing a good therapist for a child with autism is not easy if you haven't worked with a child yourself. Many experienced parents will actually be able to train their new therapists. Therapists can be anyone with enough energy, enthusiasm, patience, and genuine love for children. Those below the age of 18 are often too young and immature. Mothers with children often don't have the time and energy and often don't like to be told how to deal with children as they feel they are the experts. A good tip is to make a short list of the ones you feel may be suitable and tell them there will be a training period of a couple of weeks during which there will be no payment. Many will drop out as working with a child with autism is very demanding and not suited to everyone. Whilst there are many excellent special education schools around, sadly, many are underfunded, understaffed, and ill-equipped to teach children with autism. There is usually not enough one-on-one support for the child, and worst of all, the child can pick up inappropriate behaviors from the other autistic children. I find all this heartbreaking as there is so much a child with autism can learn in the critical early years. Your goal should be to get your child into a mainstream school. 3 years of intensive one-on-one work at home will go a long way towards successfully mainstreaming a child. Once a child with autism is successfully mainstreamed, you have won half the battle. I say this because it would be wise to continue working with him at home as well. You may need to educate the principal and staff on autism, and a good idea is for you or your therapist or consultant to do a short presentation. I would strongly advise liaising with your child's teachers to address any difficulties at school. You could use this feedback to work with him at home, thus preventing him from falling behind. Obtaining in advance his school books and material they are going to cover at school is a good idea. Getting his work material beforehand will give you something to work with him at home, reading them to him at night, etc., so it is not all new to him at school. It is advisable to keep his home therapist as his school aides, as they will know him a lot better than any school-provided aide. You'll need to discuss this with the school principal before he enters school. Once he enters school, you may need to begin with short hours, e.g. 2-3 hours a day, and gradually build up to a full day. A child with autism often has uneven skills, e.g. he may have very strong areas such as memorizing pictures or words and reading at an early age, and weak areas such as making social contact with his peers. You need to firstly identify the strong areas. It goes without saying that you should use these strengths to the fullest advantage. For example, if the child has strong reading skills, explore this to the maximum. Many children with autism have very strong visual skills. Use pictures to stimulate and refine their language. If your child learns to read or write before he gets to school, it will be one less thing to worry about, and he will have more time to learn other skills that he is lacking. My child can't talk at all. Where do I start? A frantic mother of a child with autism once phoned me with this question. Teaching speech to a child with autism is done on a step-by-step basis. A child cannot run before he can walk. ABA has 3 broad phases working towards spoken language. 1. Matching. 2. Receptive language. 3. Expressive language. Matching itself is broken up into 1. Matching identical images. 2. The non-identical pictures, i.e. matching a red car with a different colored one. Receptive language comes next. This is where the child is asked for various pictures, for example, show me cat, horse, house, etc. More on this later. If your child can achieve receptive language or has already reached this stage, this is promising, as he can at least understand what you are saying, and this will ultimately lead to him expressing himself verbally. Do not be complacent though, as his vocabulary may be limited. You must do what you can to make sure his vocabulary is expanded as widely as possible. Receptive language is a major step in the progress of a child with autism. It is, however, not enough for the child to understand just a handful of words such as food, milk, bike, etc. A typical child of 7 can understand and use at least 10,000 words. A child with autism needs to have his receptive language boosted as early and as quickly as possible. There are not many receptive language apps out there. A good one is called Squiz, available on the Google Play Store. This app gives you 5 phases to teach your child. The quick tutor allows the child to flick through the hundreds of images with the labels read out loud. Matching gets the child to match identical and non-identical images. Receptive words encourages the child to identify the words by saying touch, dog, cat, car, etc. Phonics tutors the child on the sounds of the alphabet. Reading encourages the child to identify the words sounded out. The app allows you to select the categories to teach your child. Using images is a good way to teach speech, language, and communication. Children with autism are highly visual and can be taught almost anything using images. Temple Grandin, the famous author of many books on autism, said that she thinks in pictures. You need thousands of good pictures to help with generalization, i.e., if a child with autism has just one picture of a white dog and is taught this is a dog, he may not easily recognize a German Shepherd or a Rottweiler as a dog when he sees it. Using new and varied material also keeps a child from getting bored and frustrated. Minimize the number of stick images or drawings used. Actual color photographic material is best as the images are more lifelike and much easier for the child to relate to. You can never have too many pictures in your collection. Get them from anywhere you can: magazines, old books, the web, printed catalogs, even junk mail. The Flash Pro 3 USB contains over 15,000 color photographic teaching images that can be printed from a home PC to a color printer. The USB is available on www.helpingtogrow.com. The USB comes with a program that allows you to select 1, 2, 4, 6, or 8 images per page. You can have the labels switched on or off. The images can be used in any teaching system such as ABA, including working with matching, receptive language, and expressive language. It is always an excellent idea to include your own pictures taken of the child's environment, family members, familiar locations, occasions, school, classroom, school friends, etc. to teach your child. The Flash Pro 3 allows you to bring up your own digital images to and display, resize, and print them with or without labels. It is important to organize your cards or you will waste vital time looking for them when you need them. My suggestion for the size of flashcards to be used for teaching purposes is to keep a standard of 4 per letter sized, or A4, page. Much bigger and you'll find it hard to file away the pictures. I use one cabinet drawer per category. You can cut cards with name tabs so they stand out above the cards to subdivide the categories, e.g. for animals, cat, dog, chicken, etc. Once a noun, verb, or concept has been mastered by your child, you must rotate your material, i.e. don't use the same picture over and over again, as this can be very frustrating for a child with autism. A good idea to ensure your images are rotated is to select from front and return to back, i.e. if you have 8 pictures of a cat, then choose the one from the front of the set, and when you're done with it, return it to the back of the set. Autism is a sensory condition affecting one or more of the child's senses. Touch. A child with autism could be very sensitive to touch and may resist close contact, hugging, etc., even from his parents. Sound. Certain sounds could be unbearable to an autistic child. He may even hold his ears when hearing some voices or sounds. Some children with extreme sound sensitivity will respond better if the teacher talks softly. Taste. Certain food textures could be unpalatable to a child with autism. Some children will only eat a select few foods. Sight. One autistic adult stated that he could not stand to look at the color yellow. Smell. Some children may show a strong preference for certain, often unusual odors. You should bear these in mind when setting up your child's learning environment and be prepared to make any adjustments. A child with autism should begin work in a quiet environment without any distractions. However, the real world is not so sterile. A classroom of kids can be very noisy. You should thus slowly introduce noise into your child's teaching environment. One way is to start with the doors and windows closed, and over a period of time, gradually open the doors and windows. You could also introduce very soft music, turning the sound up very gradually over the weeks. If you find your child cannot concentrate, reduce the noise levels and start again. Working and concentrating at the table for a child with autism will not be easy, especially at the start. Keep the sessions very short to begin with. It is always tempting to keep going when the child is doing well. But this will backfire if you keep the child working at a drill for too long. You will know this when the child does not want to begin the next drill, as he will show a lot of protest behavior. Always move up gradually. Never reward a child who is working well with more work. If you feel he has done particularly well at a drill, let him go for a short break to do whatever he wants. He will soon make the connection between good work and rewards. There may be times when you reward him with a break just for coming to the table with no protest at all. When you begin a set of drills with your child, You must always finish on a positive note. If you end a drill when the child has a tantrum, this will simply tell him he can end his work with a tantrum. A tantrum could mean that the drill is too long, too difficult, or even frustratingly easy or boring. There may be times when the child will simply not finish a drill. If this happens, get him to do something a lot easier to finish off. For example, clap your hands. He claps. Okay, good boy, off you go. This principle applies to all aspects of the child's activities. For example, if he tantrums to brush his teeth and you allow him to leave the bathroom whilst he is yelling, he learns that the best way to get out of brushing his teeth is to throw a tantrum. The only way to deal with a tantrum is to ignore it. This can be very difficult. You must continue with the task at hand, or at least until the tantrum has subsided. Letting him go then will teach him he gets rewarded for good behavior of finishing the task. You must set aside a room to do your work and store your equipment such as toys, books, pictures, cards, computer, videos, etc. You will soon build up a huge volume of items that must be available when you need them. A good shelving system to hold your books, videotapes, and lots of good-sized stackable drawers for your cards, pictures, and toys is a good idea. If your child has outgrown his toys, put them away in the garage. Some toys that have lost their reinforcing value could be brought back at a later stage. For a child with autism, appropriate play with toys is always a plus. Don't hold back on getting him new toys. Joining a toy library is a good idea to save money. Another idea is networking with other parents and exchanging toys with them. Reading is of course a vital skill without which a child cannot get very far in school or society. A common mistake, however, is to teach reading using just words without pictures or any other media. The child could learn to sight read by memorizing the sequence of letters but may not understand much of what he is reading. A much better approach is to begin by using pictures with the text underneath. The child will then associate the words with the pictures. Do not teach your child to read words he would not know the meaning of. The Squiz app mentioned before has all the phonics sounds to teach your child together with example images. My son learned his alphabet from Sesame Street before he was 3. He loves watching movies. I use this to an advantage by allowing him to watch DVDs with the subtitles turned on. Without a doubt, this has contributed to his reading skills. When testing your child's spelling, don't simply say, for example, spell cat. Challenge him to work out the word you want by saying, e.g., what animal goes meow and drinks milk. When he says cat, you say, great, spell cat. This will help him build the connections in the mind that all developing children need. Be imaginative and use different clues each time. Once your child has mastered an exercise, be it understanding of a word, concept, spelling, reading, or whatever, you must move on or he will get bored and frustrated, and this could manifest itself in bad behavior. A good rule of thumb is if the child gets the exercise correct 8 times out of 10, consider it mastered. Move on to the next piece of material, but do the mastered exercise twice a week for 2 weeks, then once a week for a month, then once a fortnight for 2 months, and then once a month for 4 months. The exercise is then truly mastered. You could be running several different programs on any given day. Working with your child will teach you to challenge your child, but not to the point where the demands are too high. A consultant to monitor your teaching schedule is well worth considering. At the start, a consultant will establish a baseline, i.e., establish where the child is at developmentally, and accordingly draw up a teaching program to be followed on a daily basis. Ideally, you should see your consultant once a week. On a weekly basis, a good consultant will work intensively with your child for 1 to 2 hours while you watch very carefully. You will need to do the same work over the following week. After working with the child, the consultant will speak to the parents and decide on the work to be done in the following week. With our son, we kept a live spreadsheet document of the work we did over the week. When the consultant came in the following week, she could look at the printout and see at a glance how he fared over the week. At the end of the meeting, she would amend the sheet to include any new programs. With several different drills in your child's schedule, you must have some sort of recording system. Keeping a record of a child's drills and progress is very important. If this is not done, you run the risk of not remembering what the child has learned. You will frustrate the child by using materials repetitively, and worst of all, you could drop material from a drill before it has been mastered. A simple but very effective way is to record the child's progress on a spreadsheet such as Excel. Keeping a track of pictures, words, etc. that are mastered, current, and next, gives you an easy way of rotating your materials so the child doesn't get bored with mastered items. This also keeps him focused on current material and allows you time to work on obtaining new items and ideas that can be added to the list. The entire schedule can be held on a single file with each program on a different worksheet within the file. The complete Webster's Dictionary has over 460,000 words. However, around 75% of all words used in school books, library books, newspapers, and magazines are in the Dolch Basic Sight vocabulary of just 220 words. Keep these words handy and teach them to your child as soon as possible. Have pictures put up on your wall or notice board with the labels below them. When your child starts reading, this list should be kept handy. Some concepts such as think and wish will come after simpler items such as jump and drink. An excellent source of words is from the Ladybird book series called Keywords Reading Scheme, which is a set of little children's storybooks organized very cleverly to include the 1,200 most used words in the English language. These well-illustrated books gradually build the child's language. Recording your child's progress is a lot of work, but if you don't do it, you run the risk of him losing words and ultimately having a very limited vocabulary. It is not uncommon to come across an untreated child with autism in his teens with a vocabulary of less than 200 words. Some educators will tell you that you will ultimately hit a brick wall, i.e., you won't be able to go past a certain point when teaching an autistic child. Do not believe this. By 6 years, our son could read and understand over 1,000 words and spell over 400, with his vocabulary increasing with each day. Children with autism are usually very strong visual learners and can benefit enormously from a home computer. The best software allows you to edit information and enter new teaching material and reinforcement. Reinforcement is vital, and severely lacking in many learning software packages, to hold the child's interest and involvement. At least 50% of children with autism respond to dietary intervention. The main culprits are casein, found in dairy products, and gluten, found in wheat, barley, rye and oats. Many research scientists indicate that incompletely digested gluten and/or casein enters the bloodstream and plays havoc with the child's system, affecting brain function and learning processes. Many parents observe that casein and gluten foods make their children vague, sluggish and spacey. Others say these foods trigger episodes of extreme aggression or self-harm. Dr. Kala Reichiltase is a noted scientist who has written extensively on this topic. It is extremely difficult to maintain a GFCF, gluten-free, casein-free, diet, however it is possible and many parents claim excellent results. There is a good book called Special Diets for Special Kids, written by Lisa Lewis, that includes GFCF recipes. Recent studies are showing that vitamin E reduces oxidative stress and may be able to protect against chemical damage that may cause autism. Excellent natural sources of vitamin E are raw sunflower seeds, almonds, olives, papaya, turnips and spinach. New studies are showing that digestive enzymes, particularly DPP4, break down gluten and casein. Many parents have found that enzymes allow them to take their children off the gluten-free/casein-free diet without triggering off side effects or behavioral regressions. The book Biological Treatments for Autism and PDD by Dr. William Shaw is well worth reading. Regardless of whether you use diet intervention, enzymes, drugs or other medication, none of these is a substitute for early intervention, i.e., you must keep teaching your child, using this window of opportunity to his best advantage. Many people believe that children with autism have high levels of mercury and other heavy metals. You can find out if your child has indeed heavy metals is to send a hair sample for analysis to a reputable lab. There has been much debate about vaccines, particularly the MMR vaccine. Note that whatever biological treatment steps you take to treat a child with autism, you simply must continue with behavioral therapy or his progress will be slow. All children benefit from physical exercise. Children with autism have shown remarkable improvement with vigorous exercise, especially with concentration and alertness. The huge amount of auditory stimulus can easily overload a child with autism. In some cases, the child would attempt to block out the stimulus by holding his ears or by rocking to and fro. The best way to calm down a child with autism is to lower the noise and other stimulus levels right down. Bright flashing colors could also be distressing to him. Getting enough sleep is very important to a child with autism, as the stimulus load on him through the day will be much greater than on a typical child. Stimulatory behavior or stims are when the child will do something repetitively, such as flapping his hands or running to and fro. A stim is usually a coping mechanism for the child. A little stimming should be tolerated by the parents. Getting him interested in something else is the ideal way of avoiding this behavior. Echolalia is where the child will repeat, often repetitively, what he hears without necessarily understanding what he is saying. Although this is not the best behavior, the child can at least vocalize words and can be taught speech and language. You could use this to the fullest advantage by getting your child to express a variety of words that will come into use in his following years. Better still, show him a picture of what you are saying before saying it. The child may babble repetitively about a number of things, such as his favorite TV show or movie. Many experts will say to stop all babbling in your child. I would not agree entirely with this, for the simple reason that even typical children babble as a precursor to speech, usually at around 1.5 years of age. Children with autism will begin speech later and will start at that stage by babbling. All you need to do is establish with him when this is okay, for example when he is at home, and when it is not, i.e. in public. Like all of us, your child will need a complete break from work every few months. Some parents have even reported a sudden surge in speech when they have taken their child out of town or away on holiday. When you resume work with him, you may need to start slowly and build on that over a week or two. I often get mothers calling up and asking about toilet training. Toilet training in typical children starts at around 2 to 3 years. When you feel your child is ready, you need to remove his nappy and allow him to feel the discomfort of the mess in his pants for a while before changing him. You need to start with training him to pass urine. To start serious training, you need to set aside a weekend. You need a buzzer or beeping timer, a portable toilet that he can easily sit on, and lots of reinforcers, e.g. bits of sweets, chocolate or some other rewards. Do this exercise in the living room or area that he plays in. Give him lots of fluids to drink, juice, water, lemonade, etc. Set the timer to go off every 15 minutes, and each time it goes off, sit him on the toilet for around a minute. Do not pressure him to do anything. If he passes even a little urine, reward him immediately so he associates the reward with doing the job. Allow him access to the portable toilet until he is ready to use the regular toilet. A child with autism must be encouraged to do things for himself. A system called reverse chaining can be useful here, whereby a task can be broken up into steps. A simple example is pulling up his pants. Start by pulling up his pants up for him until they're almost on and get him to do the rest. Do this for a number of days until he gets the hang of it. Then try to get him to start between the knees and hips. He will soon do it from the ankles up. Many parents would simply dress the child themselves, but the extra effort involved in reverse chaining will encourage the child to be independent and have more self-esteem. When his language improves, get him to order something he wants at a place such as McDonald's whilst you watch from a distance. Choose a quiet time initially when he doesn't have to queue up, as this itself is a feat on its own. Another vital area where a child with autism must be taught early is safety in his environment. Safety should be encouraged from a very early age. Crossing the road is difficult for any young child, and you would need to hold the child's hand whenever near traffic. However, instilling the basic concept of traffic awareness can begin very early. What I did with my own son was to hold his hand and ask him to tell me when it was safe to cross, asking simply, "Is it safe?" I got the idea when I saw him eager to cross the road to his favorite video library. He soon worked out he had to look both ways for traffic before answering yes or no. Within a week, he understood the concept completely. Teaching generalization is often a problem for children with autism. To teach a child with autism to generalize the principle of not running across the street, it must be taught in many different locations. If he is taught in only one location, the child will think that the rule only applies to one specific place. Studies have shown that swings are the #1 cause of injuries to children in the playground. Very young children with autism are especially in danger as they will be more unaware of the danger. After a couple of close calls, I got the idea of hanging a boxing bag in one of the doorways of our home. The children were allowed to hit, punch and push the bag that was hung a few inches from the ground. In no time at all, they became aware that they had to stay out of the way of a heavy swinging mass. A home computer is a valuable teaching tool for your child. Most children with autism are naturally attracted to the sights and sounds of a computer. Children as young as 12 months and even younger are able to sit on their parents' laps and interact with a home computer. Very few children under the age of 3 will be able to operate a mouse. Don't waste valuable time waiting for this to happen. A child will be able to use a touchscreen long before he can use a mouse. Touchscreens allow a child to navigate around a program by touching the screen directly instead of correlating the movements of the hand to the mouse cursor, a difficult feat for some adults. A child with autism must be encouraged to play and associate with typical children of his age or even slightly older. Given the choice, encourage him to interact with more vocal, animated children rather than shy, quiet kids so his speech will be stimulated. Children often respond better to feedback from their peers than from their parents or therapists. Watch them play together. Those that involve him in play will be of most benefit to him. Play dates with other children is an excellent idea. Children with autism often don't like going to unfamiliar places and seeing unfamiliar faces. Imitation and turn-taking are the cornerstones of communication. From an early age, you must expose them to as many different environments and people as you possibly can. If you remember just one thing from this video, please remember this: the best and simplest advice for anyone who has a child with autism is to keep talking to your child, telling him what you're doing, what is happening and what is going to happen. Children with autism like routine, and you can use this to the best advantage. Use terms simple enough so the child understands, and of course speak at a speed the child can absorb. Avoid long strings of verbal instructions. People with autism may have problems with remembering the sequence. If the child can read, write the instructions down on a piece of paper. An agenda or chart of daily events and events within the day, preferably in the form of images that can be put up on a notice board, is an excellent idea. If the child can read, a written list can often help. If he can't read yet, you must use images. A typical child could easily pick up 2 or even more languages before the age of 6. However, I would never suggest you try teaching a child with autism more than 1 language. Also, although other subjects such as maths, science, etc. are important, keep a strong focus on your child's speech and language. There's not much use forcing the issue with other subjects if your child's language skills can't keep up. Encourage your child to join the school choir or take up singing lessons. Kids with autism often speak in monotone. Singing will help develop the range in your child's voice. Setting up math situations to real life is far more stimulating than just written sums on paper, so be imaginative and use real objects, money, prices at the supermarket, etc. It is an excellent idea to use a spreadsheet such as Excel to build a list of general knowledge facts to teach your child, such as, is a whale a mammal or a fish? Which is the largest continent on Earth? Present around 7 new questions a day to your child. You will be amazed how many your child can learn. In less than 2 years, I had already taught my child over 4,000 such everyday facts. Once your child starts to respond to you in any way, be it verbal, with a picture, symbol or other, you must always insist on a response to anything you ask him. It is a lot easier to do the opposite, but if you do so, he will soon learn he is able to get away with no response and his communication will suffer. Many children with autism could at some stage exhibit behavior such as head-hitting and hand-biting. This can be very distressing for the parents. It is usually a sign of frustration, a call for attention, or both. Most kids outgrow this behavior. You should never outwardly react to such behavior and should only intervene if you feel the child will do himself some real harm. Once your child becomes verbal, you must document what he knows and understands. Listen to your child and document any new words you think he knows or should know. I started with just a handful of words on an Excel spreadsheet. Keeping this document for my child was extremely valuable as I made sure he knew and understood the words. The list grew to over 1,000 words in less than 12 months. If you are one of those fortunate parents who has a scribbler for a child, i.e. a child that loves to scribble text and images, then A. Make sure he has lots of blank paper and writing materials at hand. B. Just look at what he is scribbling. Chances are any text he scribbles is text he has seen before and possibly understands. You must check these words are in his word bank. If they are not, enter them in. It is of course important to watch how your child interacts with others and how they interact with him. If there is very little interaction, it may be time to find new friends for him. Friends that make the effort to involve him in play are worth their weight in gold. I sometimes indulged in a little bribery with my son's friends, for example, play this game and we'll go to McDonald's later. It is often tempting to lie to your child to get him to behave. For example, if we leave quietly, I'll take you to the toy shop, and then you take him home. Avoid doing this as it will only confuse your child. Children with autism often have trouble understanding the concept of deception. Lying to him will only cause frustration and mistrust. It is tempting to bribe a child into doing work or some non-preferred activity. The better approach is to reward them after they have done well in some task. They will soon make the association between good behavior and reward. If your child keeps failing with an exercise, drop it and try something else. You can always come back to it later. For example, when we tried to teach our son categories, i.e. animals, plants, people, etc., he couldn't get it. We dropped it and continued with pictures and labels. Around 4 months later, we came back to categories. He matched the pictures to their categories with almost no help at all. A child with autism will become a loner if left to himself, and his language and social skills will suffer. From an early age, you must involve him in whatever is happening with his siblings and peers. There is no better way to teach him. A child with autism often has what is known as sensory overload. He needs a bit of time, space, and possibly a peaceful environment at least every few hours to do what he wants, so long as it's not too destructive in some way. You will have heard enough about the bad news on the prospects of children with autism. Typical children have certain expectations of their peers, and a child with poor language and social skills, even at a very early age, can easily become a social outcast, made fun of, and even bullied. We all know children with autism need help. Here's the good news: they can all be helped. It takes hard work and determination on the part of his parents, teachers, and those working with him. I know of parents who have given up work and worked full-time for 3 years to work with their children to get them into a mainstream school. A couple of minutes a day playing with your child on the floor is simply not enough. You need to grab his attention and draw him out of his world and into yours, showing him, teaching him, involving him, and above all, making it all fun. Looking too far ahead and imagining the worst-case scenario is a waste of your time and energy. Work hard with your child today and plan his work for the next, taking one day at a time and moving up one step at a time. People who have done this have had the best results with their children. As a parent or educator of the child, you need to be mentally prepared for the task ahead of each day. It goes without saying that you also need to set aside time each day to work with your child, prepare materials, print, laminate, organize materials, record data, etc. You will find the early months the hardest. But life will begin to improve for the whole family as your child progresses. It is always tempting to compare your child with other kids with a similar condition to see where they measure up. Try to avoid this, as there will always be kids with capabilities above and below your child. Rather, try to aim for the milestones of typical children. Many parents will not tell others about their child's condition. This is a personal thing, although some people simply must be told, for example teachers and those in constant contact with the child. That way they can keep an eye out for the child. In a classroom setting, they may find it helpful to keep the child towards the front of the class. As time progresses and your child improves and he starts to blend in, you could tell people he simply has a speech delay, so he isn't treated as a cripple. The rule of thumb is to tell people as much as they need to know. A child with autism will generally begin attending school with an aid. Depending on the ability of the child, it is recommended that the aid be faded at some stage, i.e., the child should be less reliant on his aid and take instruction from his teacher. This could begin in the second or third year at school. Fading should begin with certain classes, for example PE, physical education, and sports, then art class, etc. Do not attempt to fade the aid from all the classes at the same time, or the child could struggle and become frustrated. The aide could start by spending less time with the child in the classroom and could share her responsibilities with other aides or other children. If the child starts to struggle, the aide should be brought back. Flexibility is very important here. All children respond to love, and the best people to get involved in a child's learning process are those he will trust first, his own parents. The key word in early learning is early. A child is never too young to learn. The young mind has startling capabilities of memory and learning. Don't be afraid to put as much new material in front of your child as you can. You need to push the limits of your child, but without pushing him over the edge. Each day a child goes without learning something new is a lost opportunity. Helping a child with autism on the road to recovery, and recovery has been achieved by many, is expensive in terms of time, energy, and other resources. Doing nothing will ultimately cost a lot more. I wish you every success with your children. Love is helping something to grow.